You think life is happening to you, but it's not. It's happening through you. Every person who hurts you is a part of you trying to be heard. Every loss is the unconscious asking to be born. And if that sounds uncomfortable, if it feels like something inside you is being exposed, that's because it is. Carl Jung discovered what no one had the courage to say. You never lived the world. You lived your own psyche. Everything around you is a reflection. Everything that irritates you is a mirror. Everything that attracts you is a shadow disguised as light. And even what you call destiny is just the unconscious trying to be seen. So if you want to keep blaming the world, close this video now. But if you are ready to understand that the enemy, trauma, and salvation have the same face, yours, sign up now, because no one here will spare you the truth. You still believe the world happens to you, but the world doesn't happen to you, it reveals you. Every look that hurts you, every silence that confuses you, every loss that bends you, is just a reflection of what already vibrates within you. Life isn't a stage, it's a mirror, and it doesn't lie. Carl Jung said that reality is merely the surface where the psyche reflects itself. A field where the shadow meets the persona and the self tries to be seen. You don't live the world, you live your perception of it. And perception is the lens shaped by wounds, beliefs, and voices you haven't yet learned to silence. Spirituality doesn't begin when you seek heaven, but when you perceive the hell you project onto everything around you. The mirror of life isn't cruel, just precise. It shows you what you don't yet dare to acknowledge. Take a good look at what irritates you, what attracts you, what paralyzes you. This isn't coincidence, it's symbolic language. The psyche speaks through images, and reality is the language it uses to awaken you. When someone rejects you, perhaps it's your own rejection returning to ask for a look. When you feel the world doesn't understand you, perhaps it's you who never listened to yourself. The truth is brutal. Everything that hurts you is the unconscious, demanding entry. The shadow screams in the gestures of others. The persona lies in the roles you insist on maintaining. And the self, what you truly are, tries to reveal itself behind every ruin. Carl Jung didn't write about spirituality as escape, but as return. A return to what was forgotten, the memory that the external is the internal disguised as scenery. Want to start seeing? Observe the ordinary. The way you judge, the way you react, what makes you clench your jaw. It's all a message. Grab a notebook and write, what is the world trying to show me through this? This simple question is a mirror that bleeds, because the answer will never be in the other, but in the image they reflect of you. This is how individuation begins, the dismantling of the illusions of the persona and the first glimpse of the shadow you've denied for years. Real spirituality isn't peace, it's precision. It isn't light, it's lucidity. Because only when the mirror shatters does the self appear among the shards. And it's precisely then that everything begins to change, when you realize that nothing was ever neutral, and what surrounds you is merely a reflection of what inhabits you. The unconscious is a silent projector, and the world, the screen on which it displays its secrets. Nothing you see is entirely other people's. Every face, every conflict, every love and every repulsion is a part of your own inner script being played out before you. Carl Jung called this projection the mechanism by which the psyche tries to make visible that which you don't yet have the courage to look at directly. The shadow disguises itself as an enemy. The animus or anima disguise themselves as passion, and complexes return as uncomfortable repetitions. What irritates others is what hasn't been accepted in you. What fascinates you about them is what you haven't yet dared to experience. Everything that holds you back from the outside is, in fact, an echo of what screams within. Imagine someone who makes you angry for no apparent reason, the kind of person who triggers an irrational irritation. It's not them, it's you. It's the part you've repressed, begging for recognition. Likewise, think of someone who attracts you in an almost hypnotic way. It's not about them either. It's your own unlived potential reflected back, the internal archetype of what you long to integrate. Carl Jung showed that projection is the most honest way the unconscious has found to wake you up. It's saying, look at this, before it consumes you. And when you don't get the message, it repeats itself. It changes the faces, the places, the settings, but the plot is always the same. Because the unconscious doesn't give up. It wants to be seen. Want a practical example? Observe the patterns, the people you attract, the situations that repeat themselves, the conflicts that haunt you. Note the commonalities. Maybe someone always appears who makes you feel small, and that's your own self-worth projecting itself. Or maybe you constantly fall in love with someone who ignores you, and that's your shadow begging to be desired by yourself. Projection is the map of your wounds. Spirituality without this perspective is just an escape disguised as light, because there is no real evolution without confronting what you project. And it is in this confrontation, almost painful, that the self begins to move beneath the surface, pushing the persona until it cracks. But what happens when we stop projecting and start fighting the reflection? This is human insanity, trying to destroy the mirror because you don't like the reflection. You spend your life arguing with people, running away from situations, blaming fate, but the enemy was never outside. It was you, disguised in multiple forms. Carl Jung said that until you recognize your projections, you live in a state of internal civil war, waging external battles over conflicts that arose within your own soul. This is how the shadow wins, by making you fight it, but through others. You scream at your reflection and don't realize you're punching the glass. Everything that hurts you is just the mirror trying to show you where it hurts, and the more you deny it, the more your unconscious turns up the volume. How many times have you sworn it was someone else's fault? Your boss, your mother, your partner, and yet history repeats itself. It's always the same pattern, only the scenario changes, because you're not dealing with people, you're dealing with parts, denied parts, rejected parts, parts starving for awareness. It's easier to blame the mirror than to look at the distorted face in it. But when you finally accept that the culprit is the reflection, everything changes. Anger turns into revelation, resentment becomes a mirror, and fear becomes a map. What once seemed like punishment begins to feel like an invitation. Spirituality begins precisely at this point, when you understand that the other is not an obstacle, but a teacher. Want to heal a wound? Stop attacking it. Look at it like holding a cracked mirror, carefully but without shying away. Write down the names of the people who most derail you and ask, what in them belongs to me? Perhaps you'll discover that what you hate most is what you most need to love. Removing the projection is an act of spiritual courage. It's the first war won within the invisible field of the soul, because only those who stop fighting externally begin to win within. And when you stop punching the glass, it begins to show you what was always there, the face you hid from yourself. But if the mirror is the battlefield, who are the characters the unconscious uses to stage this war? Nothing you experience is random. Everything follows an invisible choreography designed by archetypes that dance within you. Abandonment, rejection, betrayal, power, love. These are ancient masks the psyche dons to teach you the same storyline in different forms. Carl Jung called these archetypes primordial patterns of behavior and emotion that live in the collective unconscious but manifest through personal dramas. Every time you experience a loss, it's not just you suffering. It's the orphan archetype trying to mature. Every time you fight for control, it's the tyrant archetype demanding consciousness. True spirituality doesn't reject these roles, it learns to interpret them. Understand the cycle. You repeat love stories that begin with passion and end in emptiness. You change partners, but the script is the same. It's the archetype of the wounded lover trying to be recognized. Or perhaps, in all your relationships, there's always an authority figure who diminishes you, the symbolic father who still lives in your shadow. These roles aren't punishments, they're invitations. Life repeats the same lessons to you until you live them consciously. Individuation happens when you stop being the character and start directing the film, because until you see the pattern, it repeats itself. But when you do, it dissolves, like a dream that loses strength when remembered. Want to recognize the archetype that controls you? Observe the most recurring emotional pattern in your story, that theme that returns disguised as different faces: abandonment, criticism, control, lack. Ask yourself, what role does my psyche insist on making me play? Write, draw, personify, give voice to the shadow that acts behind the script. This simple practice is the beginning of liberation, because when the unconscious is named, it ceases to dominate. And it is at that moment that the self begins to emerge from the chaos of the characters, dissolving the persona that pretends to be in control. But what happens when you realize that all your dramas have the same root, a single problem, disguised in 1,000 ways? The truth is simple, but the ego makes it impossible to swallow. There is only one problem: unconsciousness. Everything else is a symptom. Depression is the soul screaming in a dark room. Anxiety is the unconscious trying to be born. Addiction is the desperate attempt to fill the void that only consciousness can fill. Carl Jung said that fate is nothing more than unconscious repetition, called life as it is. Humans suffer not from what happens, but from what they don't understand about it. And as long as you don't see the pattern rules. There is no bad luck, no curse. There is psychic material crying out for light. When you understand this, you realize it was never the other, the job, the lost love. It was always the same inner content begging for recognition. You move cities, change relationships, change religions, and the same emptiness awaits you at the new address. Because the unconscious travels with you. The shadow doesn't stay behind. True spirituality begins when you stop running from pain and start studying it. Ask yourself, what is this pain trying to teach me? The answer may destroy what you call I, but that's exactly what the process is about. Because the ego must die for the self to awaken. This is how individuation moves, disintegrating the false to reveal the essential. Want real practice? Stop looking for magic solutions. Instead, observe what repeats itself. If everything around you is a reflection, the pattern is the teacher. Choose a recurring problem and look at it with the coldness of a soul surgeon, not to fix it, but to understand. Carl Jung said that consciousness is the only solvent, and unconsciousness the only poison. All suffering arises from symbolic blindness, living the same script, believing it's a new story. And when consciousness begins to emerge, life ceases to be a punishment and becomes a mirror. But what happens when this consciousness touches the unconscious? When the I finally dissolves the enigma? Consciousness, the only substance capable of dissolving any pain without needing to destroy it. Jung called this the work of light on shadow, Tao. And that's exactly what it is. Seeing what is, not what appears. When consciousness touches the unconscious, chaos transforms into form. Suffering doesn't disappear, it changes density. You begin to see the pattern, and by naming it, you render it powerless. Because what is seen loses its power to control you. It's not magic, it's the science of the soul. The same trauma that imprisoned you, when lucidly observed, becomes a map. The same emotion that devoured you, when embraced, becomes energy. Everything you feel ceases to be an enemy and becomes a messenger. But most prefer to remain numb. They want peace without truth, healing without confrontation, spirituality without consciousness. They seek formulas, prayers, masters, and forget that the true master is the mirror. Carl Jung said that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. The phrase is a scalpel. Consciousness is not a mystical state. It is a brutal act of honesty. It is admitting, yes, I am that too. The pride I deny, the fear I hide, the control I disguise as love. The self is not born of denial, but of integration. The ego tries to put out the fire. Consciousness learns to endure the heat until it becomes light. Want to apply this in a practical way? Choose a current conflict and write down everything you feel without censorship. Then read it aloud as if you were listening to someone else. Observe how much of it is reality and how much is interpretation. This simple exercise is already an act of awareness, because when you listen to yourself from the outside, the unconscious loses its disguise. Awareness is the return of projection to its owner. It's the moment when the mirror stops being an enemy and becomes a master. But the real leap happens when you not only understand the reflection, but change the angle of your gaze. When the focus shifts from "why does this happen to me" to "what in me creates this," there's a moment when the game changes, the instant you stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What in me is creating this?" This shift is the birth of consciousness, the precise point where the victim dies and the observer is born. Carl Jung called this the reversal of the gaze, leaving the stage of pain and occupying the seat of the inner spectator. The ego hates this movement because it thrives on blaming, reacting, and dramatizing. But the self observes. It doesn't deny the pain. It listens to it. When you ask yourself, "What part of me is this person acting out?" the unconscious reveals itself. The anger you feel is the key to the mirror. Resentment is the map. True spirituality begins when you understand that the world is not against you, it is representing you. The Jungian perspective is surgical. It doesn't seek blame, it seeks content. When someone rejects you, it's your own rejection returning to be integrated. When someone betrays you, it's your own disloyalty to yourself being dramatized on the external stage. Everything you attract is part of what needs to be seen, and this realization changes everything because it gives you back the power that unconsciousness stole. You stop being life's patient and become its analyst. There is no longer chance, only symbolic language. Jung said that the soul speaks through images, and each event is an image projected for awakening. The self communicates through chaos. Pain is spiritual grammar, conflict, a metaphor, and each person, a walking mirror. Want to apply this shift in practice? When something hurts you, don't react. Breathe and ask, "What is this situation trying to teach me about myself?" Then write down the answers that come without censorship. This simple pause breaks the shadow's automatism. It's like opening a window in the basement. Light enters and the air changes. Consciousness grows not through elimination, but through observation. And the more you observe, the more the unconscious reveals itself, and the less the world needs to shout at you, because the learning that goes unheard repeats itself. But what happens when you learn to look without running away? When you can live and observe at the same time without collapsing? Consciousness arises from the friction between opposites, between what you feel and what you pretend to feel, between what you show and what you hide. Carl Jung said that individuation is the art of sustaining this tension without running away, observing the fire without extinguishing it, enduring the cold without hardening. It's living and witnessing at the same time. It's being human and divine in the same body. The ego wants to resolve conflict quickly, either repress it or explode. Consciousness doesn't. It breathes in between. It observes the chaos and understands it as part of the process. And this is the point at which spirituality ceases to be a concept and becomes alchemy, transforming shadow into wisdom without denying the darkness that generated it. When you learn to observe yourself, you begin to realize that there are two of you, the one who suffers and the one who sees the suffering. The first is the ego, reactive, needy, impulsive. The second is the self, silent, patient, precise. This distance between feeling and observing is the cradle of freedom. It's the moment when you can look at your own pain without being swallowed by it. The tension of opposites is the training of the soul. It's learning to say, I am angry, instead of I am anger. Small linguistic shifts that create immense psychic transformations. It's the beginning of disidentification, the shift of consciousness from the content to the observer. The self begins to emerge when the ego ceases to monopolize the gaze. Practice this. When you're in conflict, instead of reacting, mentally describe what's happening. There's sadness here, there's anger here, there's fear here. Don't judge, just observe. This simple act breaks centuries of conditioning, because observing is consciousness's first act of love over the shadow. It's recognition without escape. And the longer you hold this tension, the more the unconscious reorganizes itself, as if the presence of the gaze rewrites the script. The psyche begins to integrate, and when the observer becomes more real than the observed, something profound happens. The self awakens. But who is this person who observes everything and doesn't get lost in what they see? There is something in you that has never suffered, never lost, never broken, something that observes everything without mistaking itself for anything. Carl Jung called this the self, the regulating center of the psyche, the point where opposites meet in silence. You are not your thoughts, nor your emotions, nor your stories. You are what witnesses them. But the ego, eager for control, dresses up in every role it can. It says, I am fear, I am guilt, I am failure. And the more it identifies, the further it moves away from what it truly is. Spirituality is not an escape from pain. It is remembering who observes the pain. The self does not deny, does not judge, does not react. It simply sees, and seeing in its purest form is already healing. Think of Jung during his confrontation with the unconscious, overwhelmed by visions, voices, terrifying images. Anyone else would have gone mad. But he discovered the inner point that could observe the chaos without drowning in it. This is the self, the serene observer in the midst of the storm. When you find it, the world stops dragging you down. Life still happens, but it doesn't destroy you. The self is the eye of the hurricane, the still center while everything swirls around it. It doesn't project because it has already integrated. It doesn't control because it understands. It doesn't need to conquer because it is already whole. And when you begin to live from it, you realize that nothing needs to change for you to be at peace. Peace comes not from controlling the external, but from the inner witness. Want to practice this? The next time you're overcome by an emotion, say to yourself, there's something inside me that's feeling this, but I'm not it. Close your eyes and observe what happens when you shift places, from the emotion to the observer. The feeling remains there, but something shifts. You feel the space between what you feel and who sees it. This space is the self. It's the return home. And as it expands, the persona loses strength, the shadow illuminates, and the unconscious finds a voice. Everything balances because the center has returned to its throne. And when the self begins to rule the theater of the psyche, the search ends, not because it's over, but because you finally understood what you've always been. There comes a time when you get tired of searching, of fixing yourself, of chasing answers. It's the moment when the soul whispers, stop, look, everything you seek is already here. This is the beginning of individuation, the return to the self, the reconnection with that which has never ceased to be. Carl Jung said that individuation is not about becoming something new, but remembering what has always been. And to remember, you need to unlearn. You need to peel back the layers of the persona, accept the shadow, dialogue with the unconscious. The process is brutal because it is real. It is dying in life to be born in essence. And it is precisely in this symbolic death that you are reborn whole, not perfect, but true. You begin to realize that nothing was against you. Every loss, every rejection, every fall, everything was a push from the self to pull you out of the illusion. Fate didn't punish you, it guided you. What seemed like punishment was just the mirror asking for recognition. Spirituality isn't about floating above the world, but rooting yourself in it with lucidity. It's about feeling the chaos and still remaining present. It's about looking at the shadow without fear, at the persona without attachment, and at the unconscious with respect. Individuation is a silent rite where the I and the you cease to be enemies and become one gaze. You don't conquer life, you understand it. And in that instant, everything changes. Want to apply this in a living way? Stop looking for the next book, the next video, the next guru. Observe your life. It is already the teacher. What frustrates you is the lesson. What awakens you is the map. What hurts is the portal. Jung said that whatever does not come to consciousness returns as destiny. So allow everything to come. Allow everything to reveal itself, because deep down there is nothing to find, only what needs to be remembered. Individuation is the end of the search because it reveals the seeker as the find itself. It is the moment when the mirror disappears and what remains is the gaze. And it is there, in this silence, that the self assumes the throne and the psyche finally recognizes itself as what it always was. And now, what are you going to do with the mirror? Will you continue to break the reflection, or will you finally face the face that has always run away from you? How many more times will you call the pattern that repeats itself fate, just because you haven't had the courage to see it yet? How many people will you still blame for stories that only exist within your own shadow? Life was never against you. It was just trying to show you. Everything that hurts you is a call to conscience. Everything that repeats itself is the unconscious asking to be freed. And everything you seek outside is just the self trying to remember who it is. The question is, will you continue sleeping inside the projection itself, or will you finally wake up to what has always watched you in silence? If this tore you up inside, sign up now, because that was just the first cut.